out. Thank you all for coming today. It's so great to see such a great turnout for the public student reading. We are so proud of our students, all of our students, and including the ones who are here today. My name is Jennifer Franklin, and I'm the program director of the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Sophia Bannister and I are both so happy to have you here with us today as we celebrate 6 of our recently published Hudson Valley Writers Center students in both poetry and prose. If this is your first time joining us for a reading, welcome. We hope you continue to come to our online readings, classes, and events. Please check out our website for the complete list of all our offerings. We hope some of you return to the center for our next in-person reading. It will also be live streamed on Zoom if you can't make it here on Sunday, August 20th, as we welcome 2 debut novelists who have been getting rave reviews in the New York Times, NPR, the Boston Globe, and many other outlets. Their names are Ben Perker and Richard Mirabella. So please come back to that and tell your friends who like to read novels. I want to thank our founder, Margot Taft-Seaver, the board of directors, our teachers, and our students who are the beating heart of the Hudson Valley Writers Center. We also want to recognize all the foundations and organizations who support us, including the Bidell Foundation, the David T. Taft Foundation, NISCA, and Arts Westchester. I also want to thank my colleagues, Sophia, Misty, Leslie, and Christina for all their hard work. And this reading today is dedicated to Vincent Bell, who was supposed to read here today, but due to a health issue, he was not able to make it. So one of our other wonderful poets in the same Friday Year Book class, Roxanne Cardona, is going to read in Vincent's place. So first, we are going to hear from Eric Odinowski. He is a first-generation American writer whose parents come from Mexico and Ukraine. He studied with me several years ago and has taken classes in both poetry and prose at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. When not teaching Spanish or Italian, Eric is now an MFA student at Stony Brook, Southampton. Please help me welcome Eric.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Jennifer. The place is really near and dear to my heart. If you're interested in writing, I totally suggest 100% taking courses here. I have a lot of memories here, and the story that I'm about to read started in Beth Han's class, and we have a little group here, and so it's exciting to have him here, and so I'm happy to share this story with you. It was published in High Avenue Journal, and it's called Caracol. And so, as Jennifer stated in my biography, I'm half Mexican, so that's something that's very important for me to explore in my work. And so this is also part of that investigation. So Caracol. The aroma of fresh churros, conchas, and coffee weighed heavily in the air, mixing with the salt of the Pacific by the time El Son Rison pulled up to the gas station in Caracol. El Son Rison smirked to himself when a coffee attendant freeze in the doorway of the garage and ogled his car, a gleaming 1950 Chevy 150, moonlight green. His, technically, because he had the keys at the moment. One of the many reasons Namikte would be scouring LA for him right about now. He must think I'm another Hollywood exec, here to drown in booze at the Hotel Pacifico. Fill her up, El Son Rison said. He stepped out of the car, smoothed the lapel of his burgundy suit. He leaned against the hood and lit a cigarette. A peach dawn was peeking over the indigo silhouette of the Sierra, casting beams of sunlight on the awakening Cincinnati town. The mission bell out, the fisherman's chats, and the glittering gates of the hotel. As tasty as the tobacco was, El Son Rison couldn't ignore the power of dough and sweetness wafting in the breeze, how it emanated from a small, signless storefront a little ways down the street. A small house, rather, sandwiched between a locksmith and a hair salon. an elderly woman in a flower-embroidered mandil and with salt and pepper braids wrapped around her head, swept the front shop. Is her food any good? And Saunderson asked the attendant without taking his eyes off his next mark. A couple had stepped up to the old woman's gate. She greeted them with a kiss on the cheek and invited them inside. Doña Chepas? Oh yes, of course. She is Caracol's best cook. She has breakfast out now. Wait until lunchtime, and you can try her tamales. To be honest, I prefer hers to my own mother's. I promise I won't tell. El Sonrison flashed one of his pearly grins, and the attendant almost blushed. El Sonrison turned back to Doña Chepa. She was now waving to a group of school children, each one skipping away with a pastry. What does her husband do? The attendant shook his head. La Doña Chepa has been alone for as long as I can remember. El Don Seve died before I was born. Well, he disappeared. He leaned in and in a lower voice said, they say Don Seve found something while fishing that day. Came back into town raving. And the next day, he was gone. Not a trace. Some people say Doña Chepa had something to do with it, but I don't believe it. The pobre was left all alone. With children, all up north. Ever since, she's just been selling food to the town. Never misses mass. Always stops by if you're sick. I swear, her chicken soup does wonders. A little old lady with children in the States, a seemingly endless stock of foodstuffs. El Sonrison blew out some smoke through his nostrils. Doña Chepa was hiding something. Something he could use to pay the Mikve back. Something that made El Sonrison's mouth water. You have to try her cooking before you go. With one hand, El Sonrison flicked the cigarette and with the other flicked a coin to the attendant. I think I'll grab a bite. El Sonrison parked the car at the hotel, tipped a bellhop, and sat in the front lobby smoking a cigarette and reading a newspaper, putting into practice every con man's first lesson. Look like you own the place. He waited until mid-morning, when the townsfolk would be satiated with breakfast and occupied with their acquaintance daily tasks, and Doña Chepa would be preparing her tostadas or taquitos or whatever the attendant said. Good morning, El Sonrison greeted when she opened the door. Might I interest you in a new stove from Sears? He held up a catalog, which he had swiped from the gas station, and flashed a smile that gave its name. Doña Chepa stood in silence, taking in his 5'10" frame, his slick black hair, his clean-shaven, dimpled face. Her hooded caramel eyes didn't blink. Save your smile for the young ladies. I am not so easily fooled. I assure you, come on. Doña Chepa invited, slowly withdrawing into the shadows of the house. You look tired and hungry. I don't know what you're after, but you can get it on an empty stomach. El Sonrison stifled a chuckle. Tables had never been turned on him so fast, his charm so easily dismissed. Even his usual quick wit could not find a clever enough rejoinder other than, all right. Incredulous of Doña Chepa's generosity or naivety, and savoring what appeared to be an unexpected challenge, the one he was sure to best as he had so many others, El Sonrison walked into a common room. A table at the front window was where Doña Chepa sold her wares. A cupboard and cabinet with a large wood-burning stove lying on the wall. A rocking chair and wooden bench on the other greeted guests. A single rug covered a small portion of the immaculate wood floors. The white walls held a cross and a painting of the Virgen de Guadalupe. They call me Doña Chepa. What's your name? Eddie. He didn't lie, although he wondered why, out of all of his aliases, he blurted that name. It was a name he only let his abuelita call him, a name he had not heard in years. Something about Doña Chepa reminded him of her. Physically, completely different, but the shrewdness cushioned with affection, the same. His eyes lingered on a single shelf with a framed portrait of a couple in wedding dress, and a large conch shell with swirls of pink and orange, a sunset in calcium carbonate. Beautiful, as Sonrison remarked. Doña Chepa nodded, preparing coffee. They say the Spaniards never saw so many shells on a beach before, so they call this place Caracol. That one was my husband's last gift before he. You know, they say when you put the shell to your ear, you can hear the ocean, and its spiral looks like it goes on forever. Doña Chepa's wistful gaze at the shell turned into a reproachful glance at him. Siéntate, pues. El Sonrison obeyed, pulling a chair out from the table. Doña Chepa offered a plate of conchas and a mug of coffee. So tell me, young man, what are you doing here? I'm selling, don't lie. Your Puerto Spanish gives you away. No salesman from the States would bother with this town. Why are you here? El Sonrisón took a sip of coffee. He had never tasted a cup so good. A perfect blend of sugar, smooth cream, and earthy bitterness. He licked the froth from his lips. Doña Chepa leaned back in her chair, assessing him. No, you're not looking for something. You're running away from something. El Sonrisón forced himself to maintain eye contact while his mind shot with a migte. She'd be crossing the border by now, pocket pistol in her garter. Running away, what difference does it make? It doesn't, Doña Chepa agreed. We all end up in the same place. She paused, musing. So many people get lost along the way, don't you think? So they often don't realize. I see it, them. So many floundering, confused, they need help. El Sonrisón leaned back in his chair. A lecture, great. He scanned the room out of the corner of his eye and noted a curtained doorway. He took a bite out of a pan dulce, chomped at the sweet sponginess. He imagined it must be what a clouded dawn tastes like. El Sonrisón nodded, feigning interest. Were you ever lost? Twice. Once when I was young and thought I loved another man who promised me everything except leaving his wife. And then when I lost my husband. Who helped you? My husband, both times. First, by showing me what true love is. The second, a tear sparkled in her eye. I didn't realize at first. His absence was too much. But after he was gone, I realized I wasn't alone, that he never truly left. He lives in my heart, my memories. I see him in my dreams every night. And that's what brought me back, our lives together, our lifetime full of love. El Sonrisón sat in silence. What telenovela had she copied that from? Melodrama was almost nauseating. The tear was a nice touch, though. But who was she performing for, and why? Finally, he said, he must have been a good man. She nodded, wiped her cheek. Dreaminess glazed over her eyes. My seve always made sure we lacked nothing. When he wasn't fishing, he was selling his catch to the fancy gringos. Every day, his palms thick with scars from pulling those nets, up to the last day. Even in death, he provides. I don't have to worry about anything. I can look after Caracol, make sure everyone's full and healthy. She paused, giving him a meaningful look. You're not exactly lost, but not sure where you're going either. He shrugged with a smirk as if admitting guilty as charged. Do you need help? El Sonrisón shook his head. Doña Chepa kept eyeing him. Oh, now it's your turn. Who has helped you? No one, he nearly spat. She pursed her lips, unimpressed. No seas macho. Be honest. El Sonrisón sat for a moment, the resentment of a rough life that soured his answer before, melting away, deflating his haunched, defiant shoulders, leaving him almost cold. He didn't like the question, he didn't like the memories it cooked up. Like his abuelita hugging him the day he went to live with her because his parents were gone, rounded up in what the feds called repatriation. They had been born in California, but their accent and melanin had simply crossing paths were incriminating enough for the agents. And they tried finding their way back, but one bus ride in Mexicali turned fatal. Eddie was 7 when we received their last letter. Who has helped you? His abuelita asked from across the table. El Sonrisón's heart jumped. He blinked and saw only Doña Chepa again. Thankfully, he had not flinched, spilled his coffee or choked. Too many years keeping cool under pressure, handcuffs, gunpoint. But thinking he saw his grandmother, there shot a sharp pain through his chest. There in front of him, not like the last time, in the white coffin, being lowered in the cemetery. The funeral he had to watch from a distance because of his reputation. He took a sip of coffee, hoping the warmth would dull the ache. Am I about to steal from this woman? Countless people, I suppose, he said, and now you. He lifted his mug in gratitude, at which Doña Chepa waved a dismissive hand. I guess, where would any of us be without someone's help? Who are you helping find their way, Eddie? El Sonrisón looked away this time, his name like a gunshot. Through his mind-flickered faces downcast from betrayal. An old banker padding his pockets for his wallet after Sonrisón helped him pick up his hat. The mechanic he left on the side of the road. The look on his abuelita's face when she discovered he stole his first watch so they could pay the rent. He was 10 at the time. Abuelita threw the watch out the window and never said Eddie the same way again. El Sonrisón looked at the plate, heaping with pan dulce, the steaming mug, and with a pang, imagined Doña Chepa's face after he left with everything she owned. Or could it be different this time? Was there another life without Lamite hunting his every step? Perhaps it's time I start trying. Doña Chepa smiled approvingly. El Sonrisón took a final bite, a final sip, wishing in a way it would not be the last time. He wiped crumbs from his lips. May I use your bathroom? Doña Chepa gestured to the curtained door frame. As El Sonrisón passed through its threshold, stepping onto an exterior patio with an outhouse, he could hear the opening quip. Don't get lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. That was great. Next, we're going to have Luisa Caycedo-Kimura. She's a Colombian-born writer, translator, and educator. Her honors include the Connecticut Office of the Arts Emerging Recognition Award, a John K. Walsh Residency Fellowship at the Anderson Center, an Adrienne Reiner Hochstadt Fellowship at Ragdale, and a Robert Pinsky Global Fellowship in Poetry. A 3-time Pushcart Prize nominee, her poems have been published in many of the best journals in the country. Luisa was already a very accomplished poet when she joined my Wednesday Year of the Book class. Her wonderful manuscript is ready and waiting for the right publisher. Please help me welcome Luisa.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thanks to all of you for being here and out there. It's really such a joy to be here. Today, I got to meet 2 people whom I had only met online. I live in Connecticut, but I was in Jennifer's class remotely, thanks to the wonders of Zoom. So my manuscript is divided up into 3 sections. The first section is about childhood. The second section is primarily about my mother. Also, some of it is about my in-laws. And then the third section is about pretty much my life with my husband. So I'm going to read a few poems from each of the sections. When I came to the United States, I was born in Colombia. When I came to the United States, I was in elementary school. And in Colombia, we had lived with 2 of my aunts, 2 of my maternal aunts. And so when we got here, my mother used to have us write letters to them. And what I would do would be, I would write 1 letter to 2 aunts, and I would just say, "Dear aunts." So that was the inspiration of the first 2 poems that I'm going to read, which are called Queridas Tías, which means dear aunts. Queridas Tías, snow falls in fists. Mama sends Cesar, Tita, and me out to play, build snowmen like the kids on TV. But Cesar stuffs it down my coat, makes me scream. The neighborhood boys pack snow into ice balls. Yesterday, Cheeky threw one, hit my back, left me without air. My friend Clara says it's because he likes me. I don't want that. Mrs. Murata says the word Arctic comes from the Greek word for bear. Antarctic means the opposite of bear. I don't know what that is. Maybe penguins or toucans. In los Estados Unidos, kids have teddy bears. Mrs. Rueda said they were named after some president who decided not to shoot one, but he was a hunter. I don't understand why we left Colombia. Nothing makes sense here. The apartment is crowded and loud with 9 of us. Cesar, Tita, and I walk 4 blocks with a huge heavy bag to do everyone's laundry. There are no guava trees to climb. no backyard, no swinging around the world from the highest branch. Queridas tías, Nueva York is a meat freezer, and there's no colors. Gray buildings, gray birds, gray bird poop on the metal swings. The only bright things are my thighs, red and purple from the cold. My friend Clara says her uncle lost a leg in some war. He's not the only one missing something. Across the courtyard lives a guy with big curly hair and just one arm. The neighborhood kids say he carries a large bowl in a bag. So I run when I see him, unless I'm with Mama. ¿Te acuerdas de la niña who sold fruit near our house in Colombia? She was missing a hand. Mario said her mama cut it off to get money. Cesar said a rat probably ate it. This morning, when I walked into the kitchen, a gray mouse ran over my foot. His tiny nails scratched my skin. Changing gears a little bit. In this poem, I mentioned Un Festival de Velitas, which is based on it's a reference to a festival on December 7th in Colombia, where people put light candles and they put them like on the windows and balconies and parks and front yards, and it's just so that when they do it all in honor of the Virgin Mary. And so when the sun goes down, all you see all over are just this little flickering lights. Black-eyed Susans. Maybe it's best to start with nothing. Blank paper, quiet room. But our rooms are never that empty. A chair in the corner, clay vase on the table. Nothing's ever empty. The bump on the head, the unexplained bruise, the golden flowers Mama trimmed and watered, her stare into shadow and light. I drove past that house yesterday. The fence is yellow now. The flowers you trampled are gone. Fireflies keep vigils. Un festival de velitas. This next poem is called Recamaris, and Recamaris is the Latin term for a shipwreck. It's also, I believe, what they use in law. Recamaris. I used to watch you scrub your hands, search the beds and edges of your nails, until the cushions of your fingers resembled oyster shells. Early summer mornings, we'd watch the beachcombers along the rockaways. For English law, the stuff the sea spits out goes to the crown, absent an obvious owner. Here in New York, it's finders keepers. In Queens, Mama taught me about reptiles and jellyfish. You talked to the old man. In Florida, you hate the heat, the salt, the sand, the water, people who don't speak Spanish. The bugs are all recalcitrant. The birds are loud. The day that Mama died, I saw you wash your hands. At 81, your nails are still like rose quartz. Hers were aged ivory. You stared at me, you wrangled daughter of the ocean, no longer clan or glass, drowned away from Mama's shore. I spit you out. I spit you out. I spit you out. Okay, I was recently looking at my father's nails, and they're still very pretty. It's straight nails, I always took great care of them. This next poem is about my mother who died of Alzheimer's. And in it, I use the word amarillo, which means yellow. Lemons and peppers. Lemons are yellow and round today, not oval, like the rats that screw our minds to surface in jealous rages. In Colombia, all were limones, yellow or green. I tell my mother, amarillo, amarillo, hold a lemon to her nose. I changed your diaper, she reminds me. I sing until she falls asleep. When Mama could walk, my husband asked, Señora, how do you say peppers in Spanish? Peppers, she said, the accent of a woman in 2 countries. The hottest peppers are female, more vibrant than hibiscus pink or purple orchids. The surrounding ferns are green. Peppers, he asks today, the nursing home's age dust or the mistaken line of disinfectant makes Mama sneeze. Her hands twist on her lap. Vines past season. He places, then withdraws his hand from hers, like a teenager in a movie theater. With lips folded inward, she stares at her plate. So in 2015, my husband and I, he's the one over there. We moved, or it wasn't our intention to move to California to be near my mother-in-law who was very ill. And so this poem is about our experience there. Drought. Aaron and I have been sleeping, or trying to, in separate twin beds in his childhood womb for months. We hide wine, red and white, between my bed and the wall. Hama-san does not like us drinking. We wake up before 6 to hear the last rattles of her breath. Great egrets squawk on their way from the treetops to the drying creek. Soon there will be nothing in Hama-san's bed but the 80-pound shell of her body. Before noon, the hospice nurse will bathe, comb, and dress her. Mortuary men will place her in a zippered bag. Tonight, we will not help her to the bathroom. The lumps on her torso will not itch. One last poem. And thank you again, Jennifer, for inviting me and for all your wonderful help. This really is, this is such a wonderful place. And thanks to all of you for being here. Yeah. Forage. I turn clay soil, mound rocks, squeeze grubs with my fingers. My spade, the soil, a rest, a dry northeast heat wave. When I was 5, Mama chopped my hair. Niña salvaje, wild child, always in a tangle. Holes in your jeans, grass stains on your sweaters. Through my hair, wind, dust, twigs. Impatient bumblebees, you know we'll have flowers. I pull quack grass, plant deep-rooted cowpeas, mustard, crimson clover, watch for the stealth of a screech owl in flight. Write a letter to my dead mama. How does one awaken this conflicted land? Last night, a black bear in the neighbor's pool. Last night, I almost held berries for it in my hands. Thank you.
so much, Lisa. That was a great reading, and thank you all for being here. What a great turnout for this in-person reading. It's so great to actually have readings back here in the center and to see all of you come out for so please look up our classes, look up our readings. We have a lot coming up in the fall. Okay, our next published reader is Susan Michelle Cornell. She was born and raised in New York City. She studied poetry at IU Bloomington with her mentor, Yusuf Kuminyaka. 8 years ago, she returned to writing and studying poetry, and in 2020 began publishing her work in literary journals. She was my student at Manhattanville, and then I recruited her to Hudson Valley Writers Center. 2 of her poems received Pushcart nominations. Her first full-length poetry manuscript was a finalist in Harbor Edition's 2021 Laureate Prize, and she just won a very prestigious poetry award from Mass Poetry and got to go up there to read her work. So please, all of you, help me welcome Susan.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for being here in person and on Zoom. My manuscript is called Poetry is the Only Real Mother, and I'm going to read a few poems from that, as well as some other poems. The first poem I'm going to read is called On Every Page. I first became conscious of my mother as a gust of wind, trips to the library with pages flipped, language carried on kites and tiny prayer flags, stories spilled from dry lips. It's as if she mined the moon for milk, but settled on a daughter's hair that craved similes and syllables for braids, ribbons woven from tales of strength and overcome. When I was born, I split myself into songs that she whispered, made louder as I understood what they meant. Now my mother casts shadows on every page I turn, little flicks of ink rising, the movement of my pen on straight lines. She's not the forest or river that I call to keep warm, the strange bell that fortresses against losses. I'm hammered on time's anvil, yet carried by diaphanous diphthongs, consonants and vowels that nest in corners, crooked and curved, anaphora blessed. Now I'm going to read a couple of childhood poems. The first one is called How Easy It Was to Attempt to Mate. How easy it was to attempt to mate on Saturday nights when my friends and I made prank calls from my parents' bedroom as they dozed downstairs by the flickering TV. We were certain that our opening phrase, "Can I speak to your son?" would yield a boy, under 21, but over 13. We were virgins dreaming of interlocking tongues, hips that rocked against zippered jeans. On our end of the line, joy upon finding a boy named George, just shy of 16, who agreed to meet by the wetlands on our dead-end street. Lori and I were lookouts as George's fingers engulfed Val's ebony mane. For a long time, they sucked face behind a curtain of reeds. Moonlight blew through opaque clouds. Like the clouds, they parted as quickly as they merged, pinpricks of light, guiding us back to my room, where we opened a stash of mini liquor bottles, French kissing the backs of our hands. All this practice taught us years later that boys still charm like elephants. The long sway of trunk and rhythmic swish of tail, stroking and feeding themselves what they needed. Its magnetic pull was never enough, but we were never ashamed by the thrill and sway. Next poem is my manuscript. It's called Dear God. Dear God, do you remember when I first started talking to you? It was around the time I was reading Judy Blume's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. When girls formed hierarchies that left me out. It was like a rip in a portal that beckoned, step inside. like a ringmaster inviting me inside a circus tent to see the beautiful and bizarre, my mouth opened wide, acrobats grasping hands, riding horses bareback, the fireproof woman who holds burning lead in her mouth, a girl who soared through the air on a giant crossbow. Fifth grade girls were a cantankerous sore in my life, my lips sore from pretending to smile. I was never chosen for the cheerleading squad, chorus, or a role in the school play with more than one line. God, you welcomed me and showed me things not apparent on the outside. Words curled and burned in my mind, and I learned to appreciate the slant of light on the ceiling, shadows that crept and crawled. Every day after school, our neighbor, Mr. Cardona, sat on our sunken rust couch, babysitting my brother and I until my mother came back from work. He was my audience as I read aloud reports that I plagiarized from the World Book Encyclopedia. The effects of early Parkinson's disease made Mr. Cardona shuffle along in brown dress shoes, gray slacks reeking from cigars. He was a dead ringer for Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island. God, are you still there? I still talk to you and briefly enter the portal to stars. Let me in, I ask you. My heart opens, but you are silent. So many whom I knew when we first met are gone. Each year, I listen harder for carnival music. Sometimes I hear Brechtian punk cabaret. At other times, the lilt of waltzes, and occasionally the lockstep march of Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever, used only in emergencies, such as animals on the loose, to signify something still wrong. Going to shift gears a little bit. These poems are about me being a parent. I have 3 children, 19, 18, and 12. This poem is called To My 30s. To my 30s, I did not swallow your sand or soil when time pimpled days with feathers, or succumb to the weighty rush that wends days into weeks, weeks into years. You offer the promise of more, the heft of ribcage and radish amid the changeability of water. I donned you as the second skin of youth, turning pages of picture books, rocking babies with the ease of song. You sandwiched me between the turbulent 20s and faithless 40s with the language of cotton and napping. I savored sweet childhood dollops and new friendships, how you matched me with other families with children, connections made as easily as breathing. We tugged on lawns and blankets, hugging and yawning, taking photos, riding wind. Now my bones no longer grow and muscles ache. The path ahead sliced at sharper angles. Sometimes I miss you, look for wild horses in a land that's no longer wild. You gave me the fullness of family before it dissolved like a sugar cube in tea. To my 30s and the brocade of birth, flashes of nipples sought and sweet fingers received in mouth, grasping adult hands. This next poem is called My Younger Daughter Resists Tradition. She tells me one day, I don't want to take Yiddish classes anymore. In Fiddler on the Roof, the youngest daughter insists on leaving the fold because of true love, but to her father, she's a splinter and a cantaloupe, untethered from tradition and from every family who's ever said, stay, follow, without doing it themselves. True love, a violin shivers naked, trills on a hill, attempts to play a familiar tune, but the music escapes through holes in pockets, beguiles even those with the best intentions, singing, look what you've done. Loss is a bone caught in the throat, a sewing needle threaded not once, but in both directions. The only Jewish traditions left from my daughter is food, matzo ball soup, chocolate coins, herring drowning, and sweet onions and cream. What she does not know is that I am trying to keep my balance on a roof, whose shingles dangle like warped leaves. There are no prayers of devotion, but reams of remorse, the repeated desecration of our culture through history, confirming that we still sit on rotten hands. I care nothing for the temple, empty rituals opening like a can of preserved peaches, but yearn for the parsley sprig, for the Star of David to be twisted and reimagined so my children will not lose what came before without knowing what they're losing, even as I know it's already lost. Love is sweet, but better with a bissel of salt, a kiss on the punum. Thieves and the dead I've loved through darkness like a tattered coat. Children always refuse, but it's still better to ask them to carry something, than to come to the table of the future empty-handed. Next one, I'm going to read if we have time for one, maybe two more. This is a political poem of after Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's called Relevant Daughters. You're tied to kin that captures your heart in moonlight, but your hallucinations are made up of mechanisms of distrust, dotted with purple aster. Inside a church, shoes lined up against punctured sky. Only the ones with buckles are contenders for the afterstory. Heaven with bits of briar. You get sold. You're given a pony but never taught how to ride. A hovering veil reverberates at bruised midnight. Clouds are wrecked, no recovery. The follicles of God are clogged. Bible of the unborn is burning. Sacrament, no more choices. Last one I'm going to read at the end of my manuscript, and it's called A Wish Does Not Go Straight, but Sideways and Upside Down. At my age, every wish seems larger than life, like a giant wishbone made of wood or stone that cannot be severed or altered by hand. What does it sound like when wood speaks? Run to the fire and put out the overwhelmed. I allow my wild elm to smolder and sway, teach more about desire's wild ribbons than my tidy garden with its rows of hedges. What is the sound of ribbons unleashed? Memory is simply smoke, fire underground. My red dress swirls around me in a train of miracles, carpeted silence pierced by night birds, footsteps, and running water. What does my red dress say to the darkness? The rawness of winter will not slaughter me. Thank you.
We miss you in class. Come back when you can. I mentioned earlier that Vincent Bell, we're dedicating the reading to him. His book came out during the pandemic, so we didn't do a lot of readings, but you guys can all support him by getting his book if you haven't already done so. It's called Gut Renovations, and it's published by Caycedo, and it's available on Amazon. And Jack Powers' book just came out, and you can buy it from Jack right here. We'll hear Jack last. And this is exciting because this is Leslie Lisbona's first reading. So she recently had several pieces published in Synchronized Chaos, Dorothy Parker's Ashes, The Bluebird Bird, The Jewish Literary Criminal, Miniskirt Magazine, and Smoky Blue Literary. She is the child of immigrants from Beirut, Lebanon, and grew up in Queens. She studies here with beloved Hudson Valley Writer Center teacher, Susan Hadara. Please, everyone, help me welcome Leslie. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I have been a student of Susan Hadara's for over 13 years. At my husband's Val's 43rd birthday, my sister Debbie asked if you had 20 years back, what would you do with your life? What career path would you have taken? And he very quickly said, I would be a soccer coach. And next up it was my turn, and I said I would be a writer. And my sister said, you could still do that. And I said, no, I can't. She said, let's go. We went in the house and I opened my laptop and she Googled writing classes in Westchester, and Susan's name came up. And I signed up on the spot. I love learning this craft. It allows me brief visits with my parents, who, as you said, are from Beirut, Lebanon. And I'm going to read two pieces. This one is called Saturdays at Spectra. That was my father's store. From the time I turned 11 and was able to navigate Manhattan on my own, my dad's store was my touchstone. Spectra was located on Madison Avenue, where the M1, M2, and M3 buses congregated and hissed. It was small, with 3 display cases shoehorning the entrance. From my usual perch by the front case, I could see 57th Street lined with fancy shops like Missoni, Searle,
and high-end shoe stores. Besides my father, 3 other men were at the display cases, all middle-aged. I had known them my entire life, yet I knew nothing about them. Everyone smoked, each surface held on overfilled ashtray. The store was a specialty boutique. It sold radios, large half-globe headphones, calculators, assorted recording machines, and other electronics, almost all of which could be modified or made to order. There was a small lab in the back that no one standing in the store could see. This is where a pen could become a camera and a recording device could be sewn into an attaché case. My father named the store after a fictional counterintelligence organization from James Bond movies. He was a fan. On Saturday mornings, he drove me to ballet school before going to Spectra. After ballet, I would grab a late breakfast at the counter of a local diner on Broadway and walk across town, still sweaty from class. My dad would say, "Hi, Lose," when I arrived and ask me what I ate. I plopped down at the front counter with my homework, which I worked on until it was time to go home. I watched customers come and go while I did math problems or read chapters of Mutiny on the Bounty. In between, I twirled on the stool. To the left of my feet was a staircase hidden from view. My father's office was down there. When I was at school, famous people sometimes came into the store. I knew this because my father would discuss the day with us at dinner. He once told my mom in French that a singer who wore crazy glasses had been in. Another time he mentioned an appointment with 2 Swedish couples who were part of a band that he couldn't remember the name of. I knew he had met Elton John and the members of ABBA. Once an ordinary looking man came in while I was there, and my dad spoke to him in Arabic. He later told me that the man's name was Adnan Khashoggi, and he was the richest man in the world. One Saturday, Stevie Wonder walked in with an entourage of men behind him. I stopped twirling, bracing my hands on the glass counter. My dad greeted him, saying, "Hi, Stephen," and then bent down and locked the front door. I felt so lucky to be locked in with him. I gazed at him. He had many beaded braids and dark glasses. Everyone in the store fell silent except my father and Stevie, who put his hand on my father's shoulder as he spoke. They talked about electronic equipment for an upcoming concert and state-of-the-art recording apparatus. My dad had a special relationship with the singer. He devised a hidden earphone for Stevie's ear so that Stevie could be directed by someone off stage of his whereabouts while performing. The person on the other end of the device would say, for example, that he had room to dance, or that he had approximately 4 feet in front of him before falling off the stage. The device was especially helpful to Stevie when he hosted Saturday Night Live. Stevie was in skits with Eddie Murphy and the cast, and Stevie needed to know what was happening around him at all times. On this occasion, my father was the one on the device guiding Stevie's every move and telling him when he was being made fun of by Eddie Murphy. I watched the episode on TV with my mom and my older siblings. I laughed extra hard at every joke because I knew my dad was directing Stevie in real time. My dad loved Stevie's music and had 4 of his albums in his collection at home. I wasn't allowed to use stereo or touch his records. On my turntable in my room, I mostly listened to Tchaikovsky for ballet class and also Supertramp, Styx, and Rupert Holmes. One evening, my dad brought home a new album and showed it to me. This one had a light green cover with Braille on the front. "Open it," he said, his eyes beaming, anticipating my reaction. Scrawled in black ink, it said, "To Leon, love, Stevie Wonder." I pressed my fingertips over the word love and opened my mouth in amazement to match my father's. "Can I have it?" I asked before I could think. "It's all yours," he said. And I clutched it to my chest and ran to my room, where I sat on my waterbed and listened to the whole album, reading the lyrics from inside the cover along with the music. Sometime later, in our Queens living room, I was watching Charlie's Angels with my parents when my father got a call. I was in pajamas. It was a school night. My siblings were not home. My dad rushed back from the kitchen to say, "We are going out." I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at him. Move it, he said with a big smile. We were invited to Stevie Wonder's concert as his guests. I hurried upstairs as my mom shouted, "Put on the velvet skirt you wore at Arlene's wedding." My father said, "Make sure you brush your hair." Within minutes, a limousine appeared on 68th Drive in front of our house. It took us to Madison Square Garden, where we were led to the front row. I sat between parents and occasionally shivered with excitement. I knew all the words and squeezed my mom's arm. Towards the end of the concert, Stevie welcomed Michael Jackson onto the stage, sporting a short afro and a silver members only jacket. I used to watch him on Wonderama and American Bandstand when he was with the Jackson 5. He had mesmerized me. Without my realizing it, he had disappeared from public view. Now on the stage was a young man who looked bashful and hesitant. Stevie got up and with his hand on Michael's shoulder, they danced and sang a song together. I clapped and did all I could not to jump out of my seat and cheer in the velvet skirt I wore to Arlene's wedding. The following Saturday, I was back behind the counter, my hair in a tight bun and my leotard and tights under my jeans. I colored with a big pen for a while on the bumpy denim cover of my loose leaf notebook and then flipped it open to find an assignment. I half listened as my dad spoke fluent Italian with a customer. I knew I had a long day in front of me. The M1 hissed on Madison Avenue, and I did an extra spin on the stool before starting my science homework. We can fast forward 20 years. It's called calligraphy. My father and I sat at our round kitchen table, the brown and yellow Tiffany style lamp above us enclosing us in its warm glow. I handed him an envelope. The paper stock was substantial. His fountain pen was already in his hand. My wedding was approaching, and my dad had offered to address all the envelopes with invitations. My father's handwriting looked like loopy waves. It was hard at first sight to decipher one word from the next, but my eye was practiced. He had written to me when I was away at camp as a child. His letters were an addition to my mother's, a P.S. My mother had died only a year before this evening, suddenly and without warning. One day we were at the theater, and the very next day she was gone. 8 days before my mother died, my father was released from federal prison. They had 8 days together. The three of us did. My siblings were married with their own households of children and dogs. My father was a poor judge of character and let himself be aligned with two men who actually did do something wrong. In his gallantry, he tried to get them out of trouble, and instead he was implicated. He thought it would be sorted out at a trial. He had full confidence in the American justice system. He was terribly wrong. He lost his store and nearly bankrupted himself with legal fees. When I was 25, he was sentenced to 10 years and did 4.5. He came home a different person, a little bit shattered, a shadow of who he used to be. He was afraid to touch money. He was cripplingly anxious about his monthly meetings with his parole officer. I drove him to the Brooklyn courthouse and waited for him in the car, biting my nails one by one. He told me what to do if he didn't come out. He was afraid he might be sent back to prison. He had been tricked before. I was his youngest child, much younger than my siblings, an afterthought. I knew from my mother that he hadn't wanted another child, that money was tight, that they had to move to a larger apartment to make room for me. Now at 31, I was all he had. While my father was in prison, I agreed to live with my mother. It was just me and my mom in the house, waiting for his return, waiting to start my life. When my father came back, the three of us were together for a little over a week. After my mother died, I wasn't sure my father would survive. I was afraid he would end his life. He had mentioned a pact he had had with my mother. "I need you, Dad," I would whisper. "Okay," is all he would say. Now I was home with my father, the same house I'd grown up in, but everything felt different. My father was worried about me, and I was worried about him. It was a ricochet of, "Are you okay?" between us. He gave me his checkbook. We sat at the round kitchen table some nights while I paid his bills and he smoked. He would ask me what was for dinner. At first, neither of us knew how to make more than eggs, French toast, and hummus. During that year without my mother, I taught myself to make some of her dishes. My dad was my taster and adjuster. More salt, he would say, or mom didn't use turnips, or maybe we should add lemon. My father and I were learning how to communicate without her. Friday nights, we went to the movies. Once I tried to pay for our tickets. You are my baby, he said, and put the cash in my pocket. We watched Seinfeld and Friends on Thursdays. On Sundays, we went to 108th Street to buy groceries like Lebanon, pita bread, and produce from the Purple Pickle. One time we went to Costco near JFK, but we got lost and never went again. I looked through the names and addresses on our wedding list. We started with his friends, the ones he had with my mother, the friends they had made when they were newly arrived from Lebanon, new immigrants learning a new language. I said, Licia Angel. He carefully wrote the name with a flourish. Then I read him the address and watched as he wrote it. The ink smudged a little when he got to the end. We both winced. My dad handed it to me. I blew on it and placed it on the side. Should I do it over? He asked. No, let's just keep going. I liked it the way it was. While my father was in prison, he wrote me almost every day. On the days that I didn't get a letter, my mind raced with scenarios why. Most of the time it was because he couldn't find a pencil. Sometimes he was transferred without warning to another prison, and his belongings, including his pencil, were confiscated. On the days that I received a letter, I would carry it around in my coat pocket or pressed in the book I was reading, like a talisman. I looked at it several times a day. Even though it was in pencil, it still looked beautiful to see. It was still beautiful to see. I read and reread his words, each one so important. He ended each letter telling me how much he loved me, writing something in Arabic because there was no equivalent in English. Loze, he would say, he would write, I love you, iktir, so much. The Arabic suited his handwriting better. It looked like calligraphy. Finally, towards the end of the day, it was time to write him back. I would smooth out his letter on my desk and answer all his questions, tell him about the book I was reading or how much I hated my job at the bank. I wrote things to him that I never would have said to his face, about my relationships with friends, with boyfriends, with my mother and siblings. I told him about our gentle dog, a mastiff called Cujo, and how the dog needed surgery on his leg. He loved that giant dog. There were things I couldn't tell him. My mother had made me swear not to. I couldn't tell him that we were in our beds, my mother and I, during a home invasion. That 3 men had broken in, held us at gunpoint. That she and I had hugged each other and stared at each other, our faces nose to nose, thinking we were surely going to die. She made me promise. I wanted to tell him though. I thought it would help me sleep at night and stop being afraid, but she was right. It would only hurt him. I didn't know that then. I said another name, Sam and Madeline Mizrahi, and this envelope was already better than the last. He beamed at me. This made me smile too. We did a few more and let the envelopes dry on the table. He lit up a cigarette and breathed in deeply and then blew the smoke into the lamp over our heads. Loze, let's continue tomorrow night. Before going to the living room to watch the news on his lazy boy, he added a few things to our shopping list on the kitchen counter with his fountain pen and a flourish. I no longer had a dog to walk. It was just me and my dad. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed.
Really wonderful, Leslie. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that story about how you came to the Hudson Valley Theater Center and this evening's class. I'm looking forward to reading your book when it comes out someday. Our next reader is Roxanne Cardona. She was born in New York City of Puerto Rican heritage. She was a principal and educator in the South Bronx and has written a poetry manuscript based on these experiences. Roxanne has been my student on Fridays for almost 8 years, and I'm very proud of all she has accomplished. I know her full-length manuscript will be accepted soon. Please, everyone, help me welcome Roxanne.
so exciting to be here and I'm really grateful for Jennifer for asking me to come. And Vincent, who was supposed to be here, you know, we hope that he's feeling better. And I actually have a poem that I dedicated to him. This one is called 27 Gerbils. You'll never think about gerbils. Okay, 27 gerbils. He left me his gerbils. 2 gerbils. Gerbils begat gerbils. Beget gerbils, begetting gerbils. Gerbils fuck their brothers, fuck their mothers, fuck their sisters. In the night long, the gerbils shat and fornicated. 27 gerbils, named and fed in a tall cage on the wooden floor next to my bed, somewhere in the Bronx. My brother sleeps beside his new wife, inside their new bed. Forget your gerbils, forget your sister. There are gray shapes climbing the wire bars with teeth and tongues. In the tall cage in the middle of the night, they kill. They do it quietly. Kill their mother, their brother. 25, 19, 17 left. They devour themselves stealthily. 11. They chew through my dreams. 10. They prefer fresh water and sunflower seeds. I give them these things fresh. Daily, I do. I dream razors. 9, feeding. I tuck myself in with their dark claws. I don't want to go to sleep. I hear things. 8, teething. I can't reach my brother. 6. I call and call. Please answer. 3, only. I can only hear the scratching. 1. Okay, once I thought I could be a Miss USA beauty queen. Lights from the street corners fly by like meteor showers. We are the losers, crownless, without title, stripped of our pageant sashes, my pageant gown lifeless above the seat back. I am Cinderella tonight. My limo shape-shifted into a rented school bus at the school. Everywhere the odor of discarded canvas. A footman, a moonlighting janitor who told us corny jokes about the Bronx. I kick off my sneakers, sniffles from the front and back of the bus, sobs too. Everywhere the lamentations, I'm not pretty enough. So embarrassed. The judges think I'm ordinary. I found the advertisement in a trade paper beneath open calls for musicals, off-Broadway plays, and commercials. My dream of fame awaited. Television, movie parts, Oscars, skipped work at the bank, skipped the final rents in the shower, and now my long hair feels like a melted Snickers bar. I did this on the cheap, dance leotard for a bathing suit, gown for my brother's wedding, and dyed to match. They announced my name. I pranced, swung my hips and legs across the runway in a hotel in Fort Lee. No cameras. I dressed my face with smiles as the announcer boomed. Roxanne from the Bronx, 24 and 5 feet 8 inches tall. Roxanne is a bank teller. I froze. Bank teller, not aspiring actress, not future Oscar winner. The few faces in the seats looked away. Then it happened. My diet to match pumps took off as I slipped onto my back like a baseball player sliding into home. No crown, no runner-up, no ribbons. A single bouquet from my mom, who had trouble looking at my face. Okay, this one is a little off. This is one of my new projects. No, it's a little off topic. This is about the my new project is about the slaughter of the Taino indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. That night, when Columbus discovered Hispaniola, August 3rd, 1492, the sky revealed its marble face.
Clouds advance like angry eyebrows, hide the North Star. Something creeps above the horizon, even taller than the Cibao Kapok tree, dipping, rising, dipping. Monsters with squared white eyes, red crosses for pupils atop the waves, hungry, forward. Someone called out, canoes, 3 canoes, rising, falling, beach, and then silence. Even the ocean lost its tongue. In the darkness, it is said, YNA lifted his head. A single green feather fell from his hair. The moon, its bare mouth open. Great giants leapt from the wooden bows and into the tide's lowest turn. Together, with all his people, YNA knelt. The sand grabbed the native's legs, held them in its damp fingers, closer and closer. Giants, dozens, covered in white cotton from their necks to their knees, climbed the shoreline. He let his head fall onto his chest. We cannot know his thoughts. Did he pray to the demigods, ask the invaders for mercy, or raise his war club? YNA let his hands walk over his arms, his chest, and the center place where his torso met his legs, covered himself, and for the first time, perhaps, felt naked. Okay, so the rest of my poems are going to be about my experience as a principal at an elementary school in South Bronx. I've been there for 31 years and principal for 9. Waiting for Allah. After he recited the Pledge of Allegiance with the 2nd grade class, after sharing all his green grapes with Emily, Abdullah told Miss Graciela, I want to die for Allah. I want to be in paradise. He placed a plastic bag over his beautiful face and held it and held it. Now he is in my office. He sits across from me, his legs too short to touch the ground. They swing back and forth as if to a tune I cannot hear. I hold his hand, feel his 7-year-old pulse. Outside, the wind slits the sides of the school's brick building. Its pitched cry wailing through the East River shoreline. White papers smother my desktop. I search for the boy's phone number. My job mandates I make phone calls, first to the mother, then to the ambulance, to the police department, and to the district superintendent. Silence enters the room, sits on the wooden chair next to us. I don't know what to say to him after all his death prayers, but I am the principal, now looking to Abdullah for my next steps. On the green wall behind my desk, a fly rubs its fingers together nervously. It circles the top of my head. I wave it away with one hand, making it dip and spin. A smile breaks over his face. Do you know what it means to die? To see Allah, he says in a clipped accent. Abdullah, there will be no mornings if you die. No moon to watch you sleep. No mom to hold you. This time I hold my breath. Hold it, hold it. The ambulance takes him from me, flashing its gold and red lights. I wait for the howling, like a scream, as the wind lifts above the street, disappearing into the cool morning. This is the next poem. Silent lunch for rule benders. Sit quiet. Do not talk. Do not speak, I say. 3 5th-grade detainees click their plastic sporks, enter my office. Yusef, the notorious leg kicker. Alexis, famed chair thrower. Victor, dirty note sender. All slam down their trays in protest. Exhale sighs in 3-part commotion. Milk containers sipped slow, gulp down in loud swallows. I grab my diet lunch, a grim concoction. White meat chicken, green tubular veggies, slivered apples drowned in sugar twin syrup. Push this blandness into my mouth. Victor tips the milk container. A sudden flurry, hands and fingers scoop up milk as it runs along the table. Blot and wipe, wipe and blot. Stop it, I yell. No writing begins. Soon, angry mother talk. Victor yells, your mother's so ugly, she scares the rat. Yusuf blows the oily whips of hair away from his left eye. retorts in his Egyptian accent, your mother's so fat, she needs 4 bus seats. Victor knows, your mother's a terrorist. The sound of kicks and chairs moving, sliced apples cling to my gums. From the window, March lifts its eyebrow, a pair of sparrows huddle, feathers flush with air. Yusuf gets up to sit next to Alexis. She flicks her long hair, her brown eyes roll in rage. I push aside my lunch and make paper files. Find an odd assignment. A worksheet written in Arabic. Yusuf, do you know how to write in Arabic? The room stills. He nods, back tall, straight, opens his writer's notebook and begins to curl, to squiggle, draw dots, draw waves in a language he knows better than English. Can you teach Alexis and Victor to write their names? My office spins with the music of pencils. Praise for Yusuf. Lunch over, Yusuf slips me a note. For you. He rushes out. Inside, neatly scribbled, a large thank you, followed by curls, squiggles, dots, and waves. Category 1. 5-year-old Kyle's knife reaches 2 inches beyond his outstretched hands. Kyle, covered in tears, admits he found it digging behind a garbage bag and was excited to share at show and tell. His 3-foot body shakes, his sneakers feet dangle from the chair, one shoelace untied. I read him the chancellor's regs. Principal suspension for 5 days. He wipes his eye with his left hand, not sure what that means. I must ask the teacher to prepare homework. I must suspend him. Those are the rules. A trial will take place at the Bronx Detention Center. You broke the rules. Kyle nods his head. It's a category 1 weapon. He opens his round eyes, wet with tears. Examples: daggers, dirks, stilettos, utility knife. Each word cuts my resolve. He pulls for mine. I take pictures of the blade. He wails. I wish I could tell him it will be okay. It will not. On his permanent record, he will be marked behavior problem through middle school. Whispers, warnings, stares will follow him. What does all this mean to a kindergarten child? No one hurt, no one threatened. I want to sit beside him, say, Kyle, I will not suspend you, but I must. And this is my last one, called Tethered to Little Feet. This is after Grace Shane. Willett, Leggett, Barretto, Edgewater, East, Bronx. Those whispered T's that clip the tongue. Best Bet Autoglass, Ruckner moves. Bare bottoms shake the Bada Bing Club. The ladies strutting Tiffany Street hard when the moon slices our East River into threes. A sharp display of twinkling gold and pinks. There's Tammy in silver inched heels. Must poke holes in the dark carpet of her new John's sending. Her purple sequin fingers raised prayer, as if to say, God, save tonight. At dawn, the red wall rises raw atop the Corpus Christi monster. The nuns black with forgiveness. The produce trucks plow across Hunt Street, spitting out gas like gunshot blasts, or timbales tuned high on Barretto Point Park. Locals gather around the hoop, where copper-colored basketballs are jammed by young, muscled arms, sparkling wet in tints of chocolate, amber, and toast. Way up Spofford Avenue Hill, there is a scene I could watch forever. Oversized backpacks tethered to pairs of little feet, talking too loud, running to school, impossibly late, where I will always wait for them.
Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you for bringing your folks, and
Yeah,
your brother
I
at
got my
last,
plan.
last minute.
That's my brother, the culprit.
Yeah. The durable brother. And now, we have last but not least, Jack Powers. He is the author of 2 full-length poetry collections, Everybody's Vaguely Familiar, which came out in 2018, and Still Love, which just came out in 2023. His poems have appeared in many of the best journals. He won the 2015 and 2012 Connecticut River Review Poetry Contest. He was a student for many years in the Friday Year of Your Book class, and it has been my pleasure to help him revise poems for both of his books. We are all eagerly awaiting his return to class. We miss you, Jack. Please, everyone, help me welcome Jack Powers.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer told me to put a book on the book. Did you not tell anyone else to do it?
Well, you might be the only one with the book,
I
right?
have a book. That's what Jennifer told me to do this. I do what Jennifer told me to do. So thank you all for coming. I'm gonna start with the first poem in the second book. It's called Last Act. I laughed with my doctor at his patient who said, "I want you to be my last doctor." Imagining him checking off his list of last barber, last mailman, last mechanic. A dark laugh that ended in a shared sigh at his audacity and ours. At 65, I've started thinking about my last dog, my last house. I figure I have 10 good years left before the marbles go. Time enough, used well for one last act. One new start, but no time to lollygag. My yoga teacher says, breathe, just be. My writing teacher says, cut lollygag. Instead, I look it up. I look up synonyms and linger in the shilly-shally of now. The dawdle, crawl, the tarry, drag and lag. The assonance of last act, of sound slowing time, laughing at marvels and audacity. Of planning a last inning. So I really ignored Jennifer's advice. With one exception. So a number of the poems in this book are sonnet-ish, 14-liners, and I was trying to write more poems about other people's stories. So a lot of them change the names, but this one's called A Little Red. Aunt Pauline started painting in her 60s, little watercolors of beach scenes and roses, matted and framed on her kitchen walls. Her football coach husband seemed mystified by her sudden secret life. Each Tuesday, she packed her paints and set off for class with 80-something Mitch Nevinson, the watercolor king of Englewood, New Jersey. Put a little red, he'd say, in each painting, and she'd comply. Each week, a new picture was framed and hung, soon covering the dining room, the living room, even the basement man cave, a little red in each. At Mitch's funeral, she put a red ribbon in his casket. And this is the, oh, actually, no, I'm going to read so I couldn't follow my directions to just write sonnets. So there's like double sonnets and triple sonnets. This is 4 14-liners, and it's called Next. My father loved his house, framing pictures and Christmas cards, often standing in the driveway, shadowed by our giant oak, admiring it like his newborn. Long before the stroke, he'd pause while raking leaves and mowing the lawn, and he'd just stare at the house. An ordinary house as far as I could tell. He'd laugh and caught in that absent gaze. I read those photos now like ancient texts, lines of clapboard, shutters like brackets. Could the windows crack the code? He built it, not with his hands, but with his sweat. His capital swirled away for the next Great Depression, but unearthed for this one clear moment to how far he'd come from rented claptraps in Springfield, Mass. I'm just guessing. He told us nothing, and we didn't ask. Was he already slipping? Was I too dense to see? I've always liked old people. Growing up with 2 grandmothers didn't leave much choice. There was nothing noble about it. Nanny snuck me cigarettes and Granny laughed at my teasing, making her speak CB language or say fart. We killed a lot of time together. Me waiting for life to start and then for it to end. Dad's slide into dementia somehow softened him. And my mother's slow decline was like Granny redux. I chat with our older neighbors now, learn how things have changed, how they made it through, catching their smiles at my futile pursuit of a greener lawn or a cooler mailbox. I've always loved old people, just never wanted to be one. After Nanny and Granny died, my father knew he was next. With his work and children gone, the house was the one solid thing he could take credit for. Is that it? Once the hubbub of living quiets, where will I cast my gaze? I'm the second son, but his clone, determined to be his opposite, but foiled. At his funeral, old friends dropped off in front, crawled out of back seats like they were climbing out of caskets, steadying themselves on the pavement with walkers or canes. I watched their startled faces when they looked up, and I, now silver-haired, like my dad, same blue eyes, short nose, height, bearing, greeted them at the curb. Some wobbled, and I worried they'd go down. I caught one or two by the elbow. Your father, they'd say. You look. I thought, yes, I said, like twins, knowing I was next. As the oldest son, Donnie gave the eulogy and told the story about his friend Dave Doran driving by the house in his electrician's truck and seeing my father in the driveway, staring at the gutters or maybe the flagstone steps. When he returned an hour or so later, service call complete, he found Dad still gazing. Donnie told it as one more mysterious dad story, but the church rang with laughter of our old friends who knew something we didn't. Outside the church, we shook their hands, wanting to ask, but they were also sorry, and the funeral seemed to sap themselves. They each turned, fell into the back seats, pressed their faces to the windows, and waved goodbye. And this one's called, it's the title poem. It's called Still Love. I was her rebellion, Ben says, drinks his beer, and she was my shop at Normals. We lasted 10 years. He sighs, sips again. She got over rebelling, and I guess I couldn't be normal. His smile suggests the last part is a joke, or at least a funny truth. But his story, listing all the moves and arguments, leaves out those moments when it worked, or they believed it would, and laughed or made love. It's the end, he recalls, when she told their therapist, don't listen to him, he's evil. Yet she got him to a doctor when he said, I just want to dive in the ocean, keep swimming. Wasn't that still love? And this one, my sister Ellen's here, she's here. I hope you don't mind.
Not true.
It's called Where Was Your Mother? Hors d'oeuvres, I said, and placed a bowl of grapes on the table. Mom, Ellen, and Granny must have looked at me strange, but I was focused on making dinner. Cheeseburgers on cinnamon and sugar coated English muffins. I narrated as I worked on my mother's electric grill. Why did I feel so confident when the friends I'd smoked angel dust had all freaked out? I focused on getting a little char on the burgers while keeping the middle pink, timing the muffins, browning in our little toaster, slicing the tomato. As my friends had wandered Guy's yard crying or laying on his living room floor mumbling at their hands, I decided I needed to ride home and cook dinner. Dad was away, so I wouldn't get as are you stoned again, but and Mom could probably use a break. I mean, who would love grapes and burgers? I centered the burgers on muffins and tomatoes on beds of iceberg, and presented each plate with a silent voila, and then sat beside them and dug in. And sang, delicious, right? It was. 25 years later, at our group 40th birthday party, Dan's wife Michelle kept interrupting our crazy stories. Where was your mother? Most of the time, Mom was busy trying to live her life and follow the don't ask, don't tell policy that kept us from arguing all the time. But for the bowl of grapes dinner, she was sitting to my left. Did she look at her wild-eyed teen son, hair in a frizzy ponytail, and think, Should I call someone? Granny laughed at my ate, probably thinking I'd be a chef instead of the priest she cooked for. Ellen was probably trying to divert attention from my cryptic babbling and long silences. But Mom, she was a child of the Depression, an adult of the Eisenhower years. The hippies and drugs of the 60s were beyond her understanding. Or was I selling her short? During my delinquent phase in 7th grade, she used to say things up. Can I sleep at Tommy's? I asked once on a car ride home. I've been really good. What about, she asked, trying to set old Rented school on fire? We weren't, I said. It was just a little fire to burn it. We put it out, I said, remembering all the steam rising from our pee that brought the fireplace. Mom turned her head back to the road with a little smile. She knew me pretty well. I think I knew when my own kids were stoned, although it could have been just the surliness of teenhood. Would I have interrupted a surprise dinner of grapes and burgers to let them know I knew? I hope not. After the plates were scraped clean, I noticed a half-filled bowl. The grapes are dessert too, I said. It's symmetry. We each grabbed one, bit into the tart green skin. I imagined simultaneous explosions of sweetness in our mouths. We looked out the window at the yellow forsythia, the squirrels playing in the giant oak, the tomatoes and corn I planted in the garden, all lost in our own thoughts. Where was my mother? Right beside me the whole time. So this field some lines, you know, that's my Irish heritage coming through again. Called No Place That Does Not See You. My wife's California cousins are avish huggers. So I kept a body between us, used Taekwondo to block their attacks, avoid their thrills, their breaths smashed into my chest, my arms useless, pinned to my side. For we Irish, hugs, like tears and I love yous, are reserved for drunks and aunts at least. Then my son was born with the hands, big eyes, and the hugging gene. I struggled to adapt. But when Will taught my mother to hug, I thought, why not me? Hugging, I realized, was committing. And I preferred sitting on the sidelines and making fun of the players. So I studied Will's techniques, his hug initiation, duration, variation, withdrawal. I read articles like 11 benefits of hugging backed by chemistry. Like Temple Grandin taking visitors to a Pacific sunset, I tried not to check my watch until it was over. Now I start the cousin hugs. Sure, I still miss some cues. Have to make U-turns on the stairs and give my wife the hug she needs. But when I hug my friends and feel their arms dangling, I tell them what I've learned. You must embrace your life. And one of a lot of these, well, I said there were 14 liners. A lot of them, it's amazing what you can fit. There's something magical about it, so I haven't figured out. But this is a story about a professor I had counseling course years ago. It's called Tough Love. As you can see, I'm dying, the professor said to open our first class. His face worn to gray skin and bone left no doubt. Ridged brows shadowed his dark eyes. For 14 weeks, you will learn about group therapy by doing, he said. He stared down questions. The stillness demanded secrets. After 30 minutes, the shaggy-haired guy said, I'm having an affair with a patient. The professor nodded and the details spilled out. The next week, an hour in, an ex-nun confessed she'd aborted her child. Oh, you must have, I began, but his glare shut me down. She told us everything. Each week, we sat in silence until someone cracked. I'd interrupt, offer them a chance to reconsider. He'd scowl. One night, he waited, a grim shadow in the fluorescent hall, and said, stop trying to save everyone. They need to speak. After we got into our dark cars, he lit a cigarette, The orange flared on a skeletal face. The next week we learned he was dead. Our talk echoed strangely in the room. We want to finish the class like he taught us, we said, and then sat in the hammer of silence until someone split open. And then, bummer, I got one more. It's the last poem of the collection. It's called Surrender. The river was higher than when we forded it in the fall, but it was late, and this wide bend in the Housatonic was still the shallowest spot. So we re-cinched our tents and bags, strapped on our packs, and under a cloud-shrouded moon began crossing. Guy first, then Tom and Sarah, me at the rear for cleanup. At 16, camping had become the only time I wasn't fighting to make my life my own. Guy crossed like a summer stroller, but the lovebirds wobbled. Keep your head down, I shouted above the river's floor. Test each step. They screamed at the current. Be the river, I yelled. They laughed, slowed, clasped hands, alternated steps. I walked in a low stance, spotting with arms held wide. Sarah, then Tom climbed up the opposite bank with a whoop and a yes. I relaxed and looked up as the moon broke free of the clouds and laid a rippling sword of reflection right down the river into my gut. With an oof, I fell back, floating, surrendering to the current, a contented speck on the quick river, white moon, black night. Thank you very much. I have to say, you've already heard this. This is a great place. Take it for it.
And don't forget to buy that
And
book.
don't forget.
Thank you to everyone on Zoom. Thank you, Sophia, for hosting this, even though you're not feeling well today. And thank you all for being here. It's so great to see so many people coming out to support your classmates. It was a really special day, so thank you for sharing it with all of us. Please buy books. And if you have questions about the censor, we will gladly answer them for you. And let's see a good picture of all the readers.
All right.
Before we go.